Good evening, early birds. Take me past the outer courts to the holy place, past the brazen altar. Lord, I want to see your face. Pass me by the crowds of people, the priests who sing their praise. Lord, I hunger and thirst for your righteousness, but it's only found in one place. Take me into the holy of holies. Take me in by the blood of the Lamb. Take me into the holy of holies. Take the coal, cleanse my lips, here I am. Here I am. Hi, Mom and Dad. Take me past the outer courts into the holy place, past the brazen altar. Lord, I want to see your face. Pass me by the crowds of people, the priests who sing their praise. Lord, I hunger and thirst for your righteousness, but it's only found in one place. Take me in to the holy of holies. Take me in by the blood of the Lamb. Take me in to the holy of holies. Take the coal, cleanse my lips, here I am. Hi, Carla. I'm just going to play through this song for a couple minutes, give some folks time to head on over, and then we'll dive in. Take me past the outer courts into the holy place, mass embrace and altar. Lord, I want to see your face, masked by the crowds of people, the priests who sing their praise. Lord, I hunger and thirst for your righteousness, but it's only found in one place. Take me into the holy of holies. Take me in by the blood of the Lamb. Take me into the holy of holies. Take the coal, cleanse my lips, here I am. Here I am. Take me past the outer courts to the holy place, mass embrace and altar. Lord, I want to see your face, masked by the crowds of people, the priests who sing their praise. Lord, I hunger and thirst for your righteousness, but it's only found in one place. Take me in to the holy of holies. Take me in by the blood of the Lamb. Take me in to the holy of holies. Take the coal, cleanse my lips, here I am. Take the coal, cleanse my lips, here I am. Take the coal, cleanse my lips. Alrighty. Well, I already got a little warning from my computer, so I hope this is not going to be an issue tonight with bad Wi-Fi. However, it might be, but let's just hope it's not. So I'm going to get my phone opened up here so I can see, just in case I lose you guys on my computer, I want to be able to track the live chat on here. So let's see. All right. Turn my volume down here. All right. Well, good evening to all you guys. Hopefully there'll be a few more folks coming. There's only about 4 of you guys right now, but you guys get in from the ground floor. So if you haven't already, you can head over to lifemissionchurch.com events, and you guys can get the PDF download there. I also included that in the email. So if you got it through the email, then you already got those notes sent out to you. If you didn't get it on the email, then you can go to the webpage, go to events, click on this event right here, and then you'll see the PDF there that you can download. I'm not going to be referring to it too much tonight, but it's definitely just there for your own personal study and kind of looking at things even as we go. I will refer to it a few different times though throughout tonight. So I'm particularly excited about tonight's live stream, just because in particular we've been getting into this part of the Gospel of John, and getting into Jerusalem period is an awesome thing. And even as I prepared this, I was just going through pictures and scriptures and all kinds of stuff, and reading up on things, and really just kind of getting lost in the emotion of it as well, and tearing up a lot while I was even preparing for this. So to go through this with you guys tonight is going to be a lot of fun. So do me a favor, though, and just to make sure that I'm online with you guys, if you're out there and you can jump in on the live chat, just let me know that you're here, that you can hear me. Hey, Chris, how's it going? Remember, there is a 30-second-ish delay on this, so I won't reply right away. And I'm going to try to keep up with anything that you guys have. If you have questions, anything that you need some clarity on, go ahead and just type it in there. Make some comments. I'll try not to miss anything, but I'll probably miss something here and there. But again, I'm super excited to get into this particular one. The next this will probably be a 3-part thing looking at Jerusalem. Tonight we're just focusing in on the Temple Mount, and as we saw on Sunday, just some of the events that went on at the Temple Mount are just really amazing. And then now to see some of the stuff as it exists today, I think you guys are going to be really amazed at some of the stuff that is still around even today. So allow me to pray. And then we'll jump right into it. Lord, thank you so much for your word that gives us so much vivid description of who you are, what you came to do, what you accomplished, what you were like. Most importantly, the message and the mission that you came to proclaim and to accomplish. And we as your church, we want to be on your mission, that the mission of God to seek and save the lost. And even tonight, as we see in particular, just the way, the reality of Christ walking on this earth and the things that he went about teaching, and the history of even the early church. There's so many things that we have to take from, even in these visuals and in these scriptures. So help us have a better understanding of even some of the history behind this little sliver of real estate in the Middle East, that it would have implications for us even today. So we thank you, Lord. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, I want to begin. This is the road sign that's right outside of Bethlehem that when we first saw that, we're like, this is crazy. This seems just like a dream, that there would be a road sign that says Bethlehem and Jerusalem. So I wanted to start off just by first showing you guys where Jerusalem is located in Israel. So here you have the modern state of Israel here. This is where we were the last time, up in Galilee, and this is also where 2 weeks ago or so we saw Jesus was right here in Cana. So up in this region. When you see this topographical map, you see that up here, this is very green, lots of farmland. You got this river valley that goes down here, and you see Jerusalem is perched up here on this ridge. So it's definitely it's much different terrain where Jerusalem is, very rocky, and much different than up here where it's a lot of lush green farmland. But to zoom in on Jerusalem, I've got this map. I got a couple different maps I can show you guys here. But I want to show you and give you a very brief background on just sort of the history of Jerusalem. So the original Jerusalem, as we know it, was located right here. It was called a city called Jebus, and it was inhabited by the Jebusites because they were from Jebus. And as you see, this thing kind of looks like Florida, and it's like a little mountain ridge, a little mini ridge. So right here, you've got the Kidron Valley. You've got the Mount of Olives right here. So this is a pretty steep slope here. You've got the Hinnom Valley, which comes along right here. And then right here, you have this kind of little mini sort of valley. They call it the Central Valley. It's the Tyropoeon Valley. But what happens is there's this little bulge right here. It's called the Ophel. And this is where David first came in and captured this literally little sliver from the Jebusites. He set up shop here. This was originally called the City of David. And so right about here is where he built his palace. And then eventually he wanted to build a temple. Are you guys still there? Let me know if you're still there, because I'm already seeing problems on my stream. I don't know why I'm having so many problems these last couple times. So if you could chime in, let me know that you're still there. Hopefully we're still there. But David wanted to then build a temple for God, but the Lord said to David, I'm not going to let you build a temple because you're a man of blood, a man of bloodshed. So what David did is he purchased this land up here, and he cleared it out, and he started collecting all the building materials for the temple. And then when he anointed his son as king, then he said to Solomon, now I've collected everything for you. Now you can actually build the temple. So So the kingdom was expanded north as David purchased this part of the land, and then this was cleared out, and then eventually Solomon built the temple here. Now, as you can see, as Jerusalem kept expanding even further, the walls were built all around here, and this is Jerusalem around the time of Jesus. So Solomon and David, that was about 1000 BC, 900 BC. By the time Jesus was on the scene, the walls looked something like this. A little bit after Jesus died, some more walls were built right here. And some scholars actually believe that these walls were there during the time of Jesus. So some of these numbers aren't precisely correct. Okay, quick glitch, cool. So these walls aren't exact, but these walls were definitely part of right around the time of Jesus, and then maybe these walls here. Later on, after the time of Jesus, the city was expanded a little bit further north right here. You see that little gray ridge. And the modern-day old city of Jerusalem, Jerusalem itself is much more sprawling now, but the old city is like this little tiny piece. And the old city walls that are current, which I'm going to show you lots of pictures, this will make more sense as we go, follow roughly along this northern ridge right here where you see how that is. I'm going to go to this picture. So here, again, I'm going to go back to this. This is the Ophel. This is the original lower city, the city of David. Here's what it would look like in sort of 3D. So you see this steep valley right here, Kidron Valley going up to the Mount of Olives, Central Valley right here. Right there you see the south face of the Temple Mount, what we saw on Sunday. And so this is where the palace would be. Most of this is being excavated. Some of this actually has residential houses on top of it, which is just mind-blowing to me. But this was a great strategic location. This rubble right here wasn't just building refuse left over. This was purposely smooth stone rocks to make it really difficult. I mean, it would be virtually impossible to climb this up. Your feet would just sink into it, so you couldn't even attack from this side. So very strategic place. There was some springs down here that could bring in fresh water into this area. So it was an awesome place to build your kingdom. So going back to this again, we see this here, the Ophel. Eventually, this part was filled in with residential area right here during the time of Jesus for sure. But the wall was built either after Jesus' time, maybe during. So eventually they encased this so they could protect all this. So the lower city expanded into here. Now this map shows a little bit more detail. So you've got, again, at the Mount of Olives, there's the Mount of Offense, which is, this is where Solomon set up idols. So Solomon wasn't all good, as we know. He built the temple, but he also built some worship for idols on the Mount of Offense, which is why it's called that. Later, it's also known to be the place where Judas went to hang himself, and that field was then purchased and made into a potter's field. They call it a potter's field because the dirt here that is like real clayish, very bright red, and so it got that name, Field of Blood, partly because of the red clay, but also partly because it's where Judas was known to hang himself. So there's the Mount of Offense. Up here, this would be known as Mount Moriah, which is where the temple was built. And then this area here would be called Mount Zion. So just kind of rolling sort of valleys that would separate these sort of little mini hills from different, to distinguish them. A couple things here I'll show you before we move on to the next one. You see here there's a theater that used to be there, possibly also a hippodrome. I don't think there's been any actual evidence of the hippodrome. So hippodrome is, if you've seen Ben-Hur, and if you haven't, happened here for 2 months we had pretty good internet, and then all of a sudden the last week it's been giving me problems. So again, let me know that you guys are back on there, just to make sure I'm not just talking to nobody. So I'll go on to the next one here. This particular map, I love this one here. This shows the wall that got built down further. So the previous wall would have gone right up in here, as we saw. But here's where this wall got connected and expanded. You see the city of David. Here's the Ophel right here. There's the hippodrome that you can kind of see that stadium. All right, I see that you guys are there still. Sorry about this. I don't know what the problem is. I show good internet, everywhere, so I don't know what is the problem. And then up here you've got the Temple Mount. All right, so this is what David purchased and then what Solomon ended up building. That model right there isn't the one that Solomon built. I'll explain that in a little bit. But historian Josephus, he was a Jewish historian in the 1st century. He wrote a lot about some of the features that you would have seen in that 1st century, just a few years after Christ. So he describes this wall, which scholars now call Josephus's first north wall. But then Josephus said a little bit later there was a second north wall that was expanded, and then Josephus mentions a third north wall that really went out far. So just in Josephus's time, he talked about basically 2 expansions. Now, the modern day old city walls would start right about here and then cut across here and go to about right there. And then it would come down pretty close to along this wall here, and then cut across and then up to right there. So the modern day old city is a little bit smaller than what you see here, but nonetheless, it's still very much very, very similar. So we're going to look back at this map a few different times tonight. So here is what it looks like today. So right now you can see kind of that little ridge right there. There's the Ophel. This is looking from the east towards the west. So you can see there's a little valley. It's a small little valley, but it's just enough to make it kind of hop up a little bit. So you can see this is mostly residential right here, but lots of excavation going on here, tons of excavation going on here. Here you've got the Temple Mount, and you can see the modern day walls crawling along right there. So the previous walls would have gone down here, and they've uncovered some of that, but today's walls go here. They meet up here, and they go along right there. And here you've got the Mount of Olives, and you've got the Kidron Valley. All right, so one more thing. We'll move on to the next little topic here. I want to show you the modern-day Old City and the various gates that you go in. Obviously, a big city like this with these big walls, you got to have some entry points. So you've got these various gates that are in existence today. These aren't all totally original, but they're mostly in a lot of the original locations of the gates. So you've got Herod's Gate, Damascus Gate, which is the one that my family and I went through most of the time because we stayed right about here as far as walking distance, and we went into the Damascus Gate. The New Gate, then the Jaffa Gate is the kind of the main one today for commerce. You can actually drive your car into here. That's a big open gate. Then the Zion Gate. And then the Dung Gate is the one that used to go into the city of David. They call it the Dung Gate because it's where you take your trash. Down here was where they would call Gehenna. It was the town dump. So they called it the Dung Gate because it is literally where you'd take all your dung. And then we've got the Golden Gate or the Mercy Gate, which we're not going to talk about tonight, but it's very exciting. We're going to keep that for in a few weeks. But this is a very exciting gate for a number of reasons. And then the Lion's Gate, which is also known as St. Stephen's Gate because it's traditionally where they say that St. Stephen was stoned to death once he was preaching. So then moving on into the gates, I'm going to show you what the first real site of the Old City was for us as we did our first day. I think it was I can't remember if we went to Masada the first day or and then we went to Bethlehem the first day, Jericho, then we went to Masada the next day, then we went to Galilee, and then our last trip was to Jerusalem. And it's a lot how I'm even walking through these live streams. So we went at night. We were in walking distance, so we thought, well, let's just go get a sneak peek of Jerusalem. So we're walking along. Jerusalem's a big city, lots of noise, lots of traffic, lots of sirens, and I mean it's a big city. And then you turn a corner and you see this, and it's this massive wall with this massive gate. And I got to tell you guys, Disneyland has largely spoiled us or ruined us because you look at that and it looks fake, but it's not. That is. I mean, this is the gate of a ancient walled city, and to come upon this and see this was just breathtaking. I'm tearing up just talking about it because that's real. That's not just a facade. This isn't a theme park. This is a real ancient city with its gates to come into, and so walking into this for the first time, oh man, I just. It was crazy. it was just, it felt, it was just so surreal. Now I'm going to show you a couple other gates before I take you inside. This is St. Stephen's Gate. This enters into the Muslim quarter. In the Muslim quarter, there's lots of residential areas. You can see here, they warn you there's a lot of closed caption TV. There is video cameras, security cameras everywhere. Our guide, Wally, told us that it's the safest city on the planet because, first of all, every Israeli citizen, guys and girls at age 18, they have to go into the Israeli Defense Force and be trained for 2 years. So every Israeli you see is trained in the military. So you feel pretty safe as it is. But secondly, he said that, well, one thing about Jerusalem, the Old City in particular, is that it's holy ground for three major religions, for Christianity, for Muslims, and for Jews. So no one really wants to destroy these places because they're held as holy for all three spots. So you do see a lot of skirmishes down at the Gaza Strip going into Tel Aviv, but you don't really hear much here because all three religions actually want to preserve it. But not that there's never been conflict. There actually been hand-to-hand combat on the Temple Mount back in 1967. So it's definitely possible. But nowadays there's so much closed caption cameras. Everywhere you stand in the Old City, you can see a camera. And so Wally said, if anything happens, your purse gets stolen or whatever, within 15 seconds, someone's there. So they are just monitoring this place all the time. So there's the warnings there. But going into St. Stephen's Gate here, this is the Jaffa Gate. So here's the road. So you would see cars going in and into the Old City from here. But this is the actual gate where you would walk in. But then once you walked into the other side, you found yourself. Now, again, picture Jesus growing up in the north, the disciples, these fishermen, largely uneducated kind of country folks coming down into Jerusalem. And when you walked through this gate, you just found yourself in just a world of commerce. All right, I hope you're back. Give me a little chime in to let me know. I can't believe this is happening so badly tonight. So we peeked into a few homes, but this is where people do their life. This is where they make money. This is their livelihood. You see, street cleaners. You see, you see everything that you'd see in a big city, just in very closed quarters. This is right here. This is the other side of the Damascus Gate. So you walk in and just, it's people selling everywhere and selling all kinds of things. Not just tourist stuff, but daily living stuff, laundry detergent and Tupperware. I mean, it's where everything was or is for people who actually live here. You can live here and it's completely self-contained. There's, restaurants and delis and all kinds of stuff, and it's not all just for tourists. So it felt like a very, 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 very old and compact and kind of ancient New York City almost. Really the coolest city that I've ever visited in my life because I love big cities, but also love culture, I love history. This just had everything. I mean, it was amazing to be in this place and to see all the various types of life that were taking place. There's my mama. And it really was just overwhelming. The other thing too, so this is the Muslim district, but look, you see here some Christian artifacts. There's a tension. The video's frozen. Let me know if it gets back and what you missed. There's a tension that you feel as you walk around because largely in our country, you can't really walk around too much and know what people's religious beliefs are. But here, people wear it on their sleeve. And the tourism here is different than, say, a New York City or Chicago or Los Angeles because people here are more like pilgrims. They're not really here to party, to go out in the town, to all that kind of stuff. The people here they're on a pilgrimage, whether they're Muslim, Jewish, or Christian. So there's a fully different sense of the tourism. There was some cheesy touristy things there for sure, but there really was. It's very different than most big cities as far as the tourism goes. So for us, it was interesting because you felt the tension of the different religions, but you also felt very safe, and it was very surreal. Let me know if the video came back. I see Carla said it did. I'm seeing. Let's see. All right, I think I'm back. Hopefully I'm back. My dad just texted me and said it's not, but I'm seeing it back on my phone here. So, the tension was really surreal, very interesting, very different than anything you'd experience in another city. And even though this is the modern day Jerusalem, I do have a general feeling that this is kind of what it felt like back 2,000 years ago. Obviously, a lot of these things wouldn't be there. You wouldn't see, electrical cables and stuff like that and whatever. But I have the feeling that the general vibe was relatively the same. And even as we went through at night too, there was just a really kind of cool old vibe about everything, very surreal. But again, you felt very safe, and it was just an awesome experience going throughout the whole place. So, all right, I'm seeing video on there, so I hope that you guys are still there. But I don't see anyone else that chimed in to say that you're back. Oh. All right, hold on a second, folks. If anyone else is back, let me know. My parents said that's not back on theirs. But I'm seeing it on not on my studio, but on my actual YouTube feed here. Oh, wait a second. You might have to maybe refresh your browser, possibly. All right, the Barnes family is good. All right. Well, we'll move on here. Now, one of the things that was really awesome, that was just so cool for the experience, was not just the sights, but also just the smells. That is what made it feel very authentic and old world, was the smell of the spices all throughout these little tiny streets. You see all these spices being sold here. I mean, and when you read about that, even in the Word of God, about just the spices being sold and peddled, you really got that feeling. Everywhere you go, the smells there'd be a kind of a familiar smell, but they would also change as you would walk through the city. You'd see these different markets where they're selling meat, just on the side of the road like this, and fish. Here was some more. Some lamb being sold. You got, fish markets. And, of course, the most important that you had was the candy market, which is very authentic. I think that's from the book of Second Opinions, I think, is where the candy markets are mentioned in Jerusalem. So there's my son. Candy makes mouths happy, as you can see by my son's goofy smile there. Yeah, so again, you had everything there. I'll show you a little clip here of the candy market and just kind of the hustle and bustle of
candy store. Hey, dude.
This is one of their highlights, obviously.
Mike is gonna shop over here.
So it's very swap meet like, very much like a bazaar, and just very diverse with everything that is offered. You had a lot of these types of things, just glassware souvenir type stuff as well. We got a few of these things, which are really cool art. And then this stuff is kind of the sort of the cheesy touristy stuff, but just kind of interesting. I mean, you've got these yarmulkes. You've got Dunkin' Donuts. You got Captain America, Grateful Dead, University of Miami. You got Harley Davidson, Red Hot Chili Peppers, even Philadelphia Eagles, Cookie Monster. You got BMW. You've got Star of David, which makes the most sense. You got an emoji. It was really strange to see this. They actually had a Los Angeles Dodgers one. I regret not buying it. I wish I would have bought it. But again, so you just see all kinds of things, and this isn't just for tourists either. I mean, the Jews that lived there actually had quite a diverse kind of collection of yarmulkes that they would wear around town. So here's one more video before we move on to the next little section here. This is just us walking around. Now I want you to focus here too. You see these people standing up on the walls? I'm going to be taking you up on the walls here in about a minute, so I just wanted you to notice that. This is us walking back out of the Damascus Gate. I think this was our last day there. Yeah, it was. This was our last view of the old city. So obviously very busy, very loud. Lots of different sounds, sights, smells, everything. Really, really dynamic, very different than what we'd be used to here. So I'm going to take you up on the walls here. So the first thing I want to show you is this little picture of on the wall. Now, the walls, I want to give you a little brief history of the walls themselves. Some of the first century walls that were built by Herod were built upon Nehemiah's original wall. So the original walls, going back to Hezekiah's day, that Nehemiah ended up rebuilding, Herod in the first century rebuilt the new walls on some of those spots. But Josephus stated that Herod preferred starting brand new, starting fresh in most areas of the wall. So in 70 A.D., though, most of the city walls that Herod had built were destroyed during the sack of Jerusalem when the Romans pillaged and destroyed Jerusalem. And then the city was left with no walls for about 60 years. So it was just a completely unwalled city for about 60 years. Let me know if you guys are back on. Mine's kind of getting a little glitchy there. Then later, so 60 years later, in 130 A.D., then the Roman Emperor Hadrian, he rebuilt the walls around Jerusalem. But he rebuilt Jerusalem not as Jerusalem, but he named it Aelia Capitolina, which was his new Roman city, a pagan city. And he even built a temple for the god Jupiter on the Temple Mount where the temple used to be. So he built a pagan temple. Then 200 years later, the Roman Emperor Diocletian, he eventually rebuilt the walls completely around. So then later in the 600s, now the Muslims take over. So the Umayyad Caliphate, they came in and they started really bolstering up the part of the Temple Mount retaining walls. Because as you recall, or I don't know if I said this on Sunday, but the Romans pushed down the top part of the retaining walls. And so then the Islamic Caliphate, they rebuilt on top of those. I'm going to show that a little bit later. But then 400 years after that, there was an earthquake that destroyed most of the city walls. And then after that earthquake, they were rebuilt by another Islamic Caliphate that came in and took control of Jerusalem. They strengthened the walls because they were protecting. They knew that the Christian Crusades were coming in to take over Jerusalem, so they strengthened the walls. Now, when the Crusaders came in, then they destroyed the walls, but then they ended up rebuilding some of the walls. But then Jerusalem, after the Crusades, was recaptured again by the Muslims, this time by Sultan Saladin of Egypt. And this was in 1187. And he ruled the region until the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire lasted for 400 years, another Muslim empire that controlled Israel and a big part of that part of the world. Now, during the Ottoman Empire, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, who is he has a pretty famous name in Jerusalem there, because he rebuilt the walls in 1537, and that's largely the walls you look at today. So most of the old city walls you see are from the 1500s because of Suleiman the Magnificent. And he rebuilt those walls partially on top of the original first century walls. And then, as I mentioned, the Ottoman Empire ruled for 400 years until 1917. So a few quick facts of these walls. There's about 2.5 miles of the walls that you would see today. They're on average about 40 feet tall, 8 feet wide. There's 34 watchtowers. There's 7 main gates for foot traffic or vehicle traffic, and there's 2 gates that are open for archaeology, and 1 gate, which is the Golden Gate, the Golden Gate that's not open at all. And so you can walk around all the city walls. Here, I'll show you a couple little videos of us just kind of walking along here. Again, you can hear the loud noises of the modern-day Jerusalem to the west. Back in the war, the Six-Day War of 1967, there was a lot of attacks upon this wall. You can actually still see pockmarks from guns and bullets, and they had even tanks that, they had a couple markers along the wall that pointed out where some of the tanks were. So there was even some modern-day warfare, and this wall was used to preserve. So this is inside maybe the southwest corner, one of the very few parts of the old city that's undeveloped. And then, let's see, one more here. This is us kind of getting to the end of the wall on the south end. There's the Dome of the Rock right there, Temple Mount. I think you're just a lot of the... So you can see even in the old city, there's a lot of more modern buildings. So it's a really strange mix of ancient meets modern. You got guys on scooters and all kinds of stuff. So right here, you've got the Mount of Olives. All right here. This is the cemetery. This is where some Old Testament prophets are buried. David's son Absalom is buried here. This is the Mount of Offense right up here. So it's a beautiful view up there. Now the next thing here, this is called the Broad Wall. And the Broad Wall was discovered in 1970. This is part of Hezekiah's wall. So King Hezekiah had this wall built, and they uncovered part of it. Around 700 BC is when Hezekiah would have built this. This was during the time of the prophet Isaiah and the prophet Micah. So Micah and Isaiah would have seen this wall with their own eyes, which is just mind-blowing to me. It was built, Hezekiah built this wall and also a tunnel to bring in water from the Gihon spring to the inner part of the city, so that he would give water to the residents, but also not give water because he diverted all the water from the outside to the inside. So then any besieging army would not be able to get access to this water. This wall was about 40 feet tall. You can see they have a marker here that shows how they estimate. These are yards, right? So here's a guy right there, if you see that little guy right there. So these are, I'm sorry, not yards, they're meters, so roughly 3-ish feet. So the wall would have been right up to here, but then all the way up to there. So it's about 40 feet tall, 21 feet thick. And this was mainly built to protect, by Hezekiah, to protect against the Assyrians. And the conflict between Israel and Assyria during this time is considered one of the most well-documented events of the Iron Age, not just in biblical history, but also in secular history, in Assyrian writings. You can read about the conflict between Hezekiah by name. King Hezekiah is mentioned by name in Assyrian documents and other secular history documents, and their conflict is very well documented. So it's really cool and super fascinating to see some of the remnants of this and even get some outside picture to what this conflict looked like. So later on, this wall was built by Hezekiah, but later on it was destroyed by the Babylonians. We learned all about that when we were going through Habakkuk as a church. So the Babylonians in 585 BC, roughly, came in and destroyed the walls. Okay, so they were built somewhere around 730 BC, a couple 150 years later. They were destroyed by the Babylonians. This is the same wall that was rebuilt by Nehemiah after the Babylonian captivity. He saw these walls in ruins that the Babylonians did, and so he said, let us come back and rebuild these walls. So they came in, found Hezekiah's walls, and rebuilt them. So this was built up to about that point by Hezekiah, torn down by the Babylonians, and then Nehemiah came in, built it back up again. But then as we saw some of the history that I went through with the walls, it was just torn down yet again. But this part here is from Hezekiah. And A little further in the old city, this is some excavated underneath some shops, more parts of Hezekiah's wall that you can see. There's Liam that's walked down there to get a good close-up of Hezekiah's wall. Here's me looking down. So you're just walking along some shops, some restaurants, and, finding out what do we want to eat, what do we want to buy, and all of a sudden there's like a little sign that says, oh, by the way, this is a 3,000-year-old wall. And it's crazy. Here's another inside of a shop. Here, I'll give you a zoomed out view here. So you want to buy some trinkets, buy some necklaces, whatever. And then they have this plexiglass to show this cutaway where you can look down and see part of Hezekiah's wall, which, again, just incredible that we can see this stuff. And it's just kind of part of everyday life there. So now the particular wall we're going to be looking at is the Western Wall. The Western Wall you've heard of. It's also sometimes known as the Wailing Wall. So I'll show you this. This is where we're going to be right now. So the Western Wall, this tiny little portion. Okay, the Western Wall actually goes from this corner all the way to that corner. But what you know and I know as the Western Wall is this little spot here. This is an open area, open arena, open plaza. That's what we're going to be seeing. And it's on the west side of the Temple Mount. So now I showed you this picture on Sunday. This is the master course, 40 feet long, 11 feet tall, 16 feet deep, 200 tons. That would have been right here, underground. Okay, so that's where that master course is. All right, here's another picture of the master course. Now, keep in mind, that is not poured concrete, which is what it kind of looks like to us. That is one carved stone with all these other stones put on top of it. So that looks like poured concrete to us, but that is one giant stone. So now this picture here, this is where the Western Wall Plaza is. Here you can see the plaza. And we're going to be about right here. All right, and I'll show you this little image here. If you look here, you see this wall here. This wall still exists today. I'll show you a picture of it. And the Western Wall that we're going to look at is this tiny little spot right there. All right, and one more image, a little bit closer. You see these arches here. We're going to see those in a second. And there's the Western Wall right here that we're going to look at. All right, so here's modern-day Western Wall. What you're looking at here, this area that's empty is the men's court, and this is the women's court. You might be wondering, why are the women there and the men aren't? We were there the night of the election, and Ben Netanyahu, the prime minister, was about to arrive because it was election night, and he was coming to the Western Wall to pray for a favorable outcome. So they weren't letting any of the men there. We hung around for a little bit, but we weren't there when he came. So the first night we saw the Western Wall, we didn't get to go up to it. Western Wall is open 24/7. Well, actually, I'm not sure about Sabbath, actually, but it's open all night, I should say. Now, I want to show you something, though. Look at this archway. See that archway? It's about, if you look at these guys, they're 6 feet tall. That's probably 9 feet tall-ish, right? Okay, here's another view of it. So you see the people here. That's about 9 feet tall. You see this archway is about 6 feet tall. That's a very small archway. It just doesn't seem like it was built very well. Why would you have such a small archway? But I'm going to show you why. This whole plaza is about 20 feet above where the first century road would have been. Remember how I told you that that Jerusalem was demolished multiple times. So every time a new civilization or new people would come in, they'd backfill all the rubble and build up, build on top of the old rubble. So this is 20 feet above where Jesus would have walked. Okay, so I'll show you a little cross-section here. Here's modern-day platform, okay, but you've got another 20 feet. So 20 feet down, here's where the first century level would be. Then another probably 30 feet down is all the subterranean stones that would be the foundation stones. So that master course would be down lower, beneath street level. Now, what you're looking at, though, today is not all original. So I want to show you this. The first 7 blocks here, the first 7 rows, are called the Herodian Courses. It means Herods. It means this is what Herod actually built. So if you look back at here, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This line and below is original from over 2,000 years ago, about 2,030 years ago. So Herod built this and below. But then over the years, the walls were destroyed. They were pushed over. So then later, people would come in and they'd build upon the top of it and then on top. So let me show you a little graph here, or a little picture. So the first 7 rows are Herodian. They're called Ashlar Stones. And I'm going to show you how to spot an Ashlar stone. Later on, when I mentioned that the Islamic Caliphate that came in the 600s, they saw these busted down walls, so they rebuilt the walls. Now, they didn't just put in these 4 courses. They went up really high. But then later, the Christian Crusaders came in and they knocked over their wall. And so now it was busted down to about here. Then later, the Ottoman Empire came in and they saw the busted up wall, so they put in so they just keep building, build, topple, build, topple, build, topple. So now you need to notice too that you see that if you're in the let's go back to this. If you just go to the other side of this wall, this isn't level over here. This is a retaining wall. So you see that the Temple Mount surface where the temple was built is way up high. Okay, so it would have been 62 feet above the surface. So if Jesus was walking first century here, 62 feet up is where the level would have been. So I show you later, to get to the Temple Mount, you'd have to take stairs to get up to the Temple Mount. You didn't just go through a doorway and you're there. So it wasn't level. This is a massive retaining wall. So you can see here that the Temple Mount, is higher than the Western Wall Plaza. And then the Western Wall Plaza is higher than, by 20 feet, the original ground. Now, I'll show you this. Here is the Western Plaza, which is 20 feet up. If you follow this line along here, you come here and look at this. It drops down 20 feet. So this whole section, the southwest corner, has been scooped out to be excavated, and it reveals first century road. It's incredible. We're going to be there next. Okay, but I just want you to see how this goes along and then gets scooped out. So this here is first century road. This here is not. But notice how much taller the Temple Mount surface is compared to this road. So you'd have to take a big staircase to get up to ground level. So with this, again, the first 7 courses are original from Herod over 2,000 years ago, 19 BC. And then it was built on top, and you can tell the difference of the stonework. Now, to tell Herod stones, you would see this embossment. These are Herodian Ashlar stones. Herod stones always had these embossments, so it's really quite easy to recognize something that was built in Herod's time. So at the Western Wall, what we would do, what Jews would do, we're not Jews, but we're wearing the yarmulkes there, is they would write prayers on these little pieces of paper. They go up to the Western Wall. They would pray, and they would put the little pieces of paper in the crevices. There's us right there. There's my dad filming, me and my boys there. And as I mentioned on Sunday, Jews today are not allowed to go on the Temple Mount for fear of that they might actually step on holy ground. And so this is the closest that they are willing to get and are allowed to get to the temple. They know that they're safe outside the Temple Mount, but anywhere on the Temple Mount, they're like, we don't know where the temple was. So this is the closest place that Jews can get to their most holy place, which is why they come to the Western Wall. It's also why it's sometimes known as the Wailing Wall, which is a little bit derogatory towards the Jews because they're seen as lamenting there. So the Jews kind of consider it a little bit derogatory. They just call it the Western Wall. But they go here because part of them, they are wailing. They're lamenting that their temple is not there. We know that the temple was raised in 3 days. But for them, this is the closest they can get. And so they go to pray here. Here's one of the signs that's posted. Announcement and warning. According to the Torah, it's forbidden for any person to enter the area of the Temple Mount due to its sacredness. Here's a little bit of video of us approaching the Temple Mount. As we go, there's lots of these little stations set up for Jews to read from the scriptures, to pray. And you have anything from the ultra-Orthodox to just, I don't want to say a regular Jew, but just a more non-Orthodox Jew. And no doubt there's probably some Christians there as well. And obviously when we went, we knew there's nothing magical about this place. There's nothing extra particularly holy about the place. We believe we can pray anywhere, and so we thought it'd be great to pray here. We wrote, all three of us wrote some things down. Life Mission Church, you're on that little paper that was placed in that crevice there as well, along with a lot of my friends, people in my life that aren't believers. So it was just a really, I'm just going to skip forward a little bit. Mike has got his yarmulke on with a little bit of style, kind of hanging off to the side. And it was just a really cool experience. You kind of feel a little bit like you're intruding because, for the Jews, it's a much different significance for them. But nonetheless, we're like, well, we can pray here too. It's not illegal or whatever. And so we went and we prayed, and it was a great experience for us to be able to go and do that. When you walk away from the wall, you're supposed to walk backwards for a few feet just to show some respect. The yarmulke also is just a sign of respect. There wasn't anything particularly, religious or whatever. It was just a respectful thing to do. Much like how, for instance, any holy site, any church, any synagogue, the Temple Mount, we're not allowed to wear shorts, no tank tops, all those types of things. And the men have to wear some kind of a covering when they go into certain places. So, again, just a really, really awesome experience. I know that Jesus wouldn't have touched those walls since they're 20 feet up, but I know that he would have seen those walls with his own eyes. So that itself was just a really powerful time for us. So there was one of those is our little pieces of paper there. So. And then all of this is just, it's just, seed that gets up there and then gets watered by rain and just kind of comes out. I remember when I was younger, I thought, what is that? It looks like burn marks or, well, what's the deal there? So, and this is the women's side here. There's my mom and Katie coming back from their time praying. We got in a conversation with a Jew who was talking to us about being Christians, and it was really interesting. We chatted for just a few minutes, and he just kind of scoffed at the idea, but it was a cordial conversation. But nonetheless, it was also sad too. So I mentioned how Jews aren't allowed to go on there, and right now the Temple Mount is controlled by the Muslims. So on our last day, we encountered this. As we walked out of the Temple Mount, we saw this group of Jewish men, that were singing Jewish songs of praise. And really, they were kind of, trying to initiate a little problem. Going right through there, that's onto the Temple Mount. So these guys are out singing. It was quite beautiful, actually, to hear them sing. You got the police, Israeli police, that protect their freedom to sing where they want, but nonetheless, they're trying to annoy the Muslims. So, again, lots of tension that you feel in various places, but also you do feel quite safe as well. So, all right, so now we're going to be going into the Davidson Center, which is this southwest corner here, which was just an incredible highlight for us. This was a very special place. So here we are at the Western Wall. This down here is where we're going to be. This is the part that's been excavated. I'll show you an aerial shot. You can see that all this is dug out. So all this is dug out to 1st century. And it was breathtaking. Here's a... back to this one here, you'll kind of see we were right here. We're going to be going along here and going along the south face here. Okay, here's a close-up. There's those arches again. We're going to be coming underneath. See this big arch here? This is called Robinson's Arch, named after the archaeologist that discovered it. This is called Wilson's Arch now. And then you see this, there's just a ramp that would go into, you can see the light for the doorways. And there is still, so when we left the Temple Mount on our last day, we came out this gate, which is crazy. But we came out this gate here. So those guys that were dancing, they were dancing right there. All right, just to give you an idea of where this happened, those guys were dancing right there. And I literally mean right there, because that arch is still there. And it's been built up and around. There's lots of residential area right here. This is open air, but residential area here. But you walk out on ground level to right here onto this place. And so those guys were dancing right there, which is just crazy, right? Now, this arch, Robinson's Arch, so you see, I told you that you have to climb a set of stairs to get up to the level. So this arch is called Robinson's Arch, and you come along here to the south, you got the southern steps, and these are the Holda gates. There's a double gates here, and there's triple gates over here, which you can't, it's not in that picture. There's another view of Robinson's Arch. All right, this is just some kind of a rendering. Looks like a digital or a painting of some sort. So this is what Robinson's Arch would have looked like. Now, Herod built all this because Herod loved to build, and he wanted to make his name great, and he accomplished. We know Herod's name now because of all the stuff he built. Here's another view of Robinson's Arch, what it would have looked like. And here's one more. Now look down. There's Wilson's Arch again. Okay, so there's Wilson's Arch. Let's go back to this one. You see Wilson's Arch again. And here we go, another one, Wilson's Arch right here. So when we came out right here. That's where those guys were dancing. Let's see. Now I'll show you then. Okay, so if we're looking, there's Wilson's Arch. We'll go back to this picture. Wilson's Arch. Here's Robinson's Arch. Robinson's Arch. Wilson's Arch. Now I want to show you where Robinson's Arch used to be. And it is right here. See what I'm pointing at it right now, actually, so that's really convenient. Right there is where Robinson's Arch used to be. It's not there any longer, but that is where the platform would have connected. All right, so if I go back to this picture here, that's what we're, so I'm standing right here, and I'm pointing up right there, right? So see the southwest corner. You see the southwest corner. That's where I'm at, pointing up at Robinson's Arch and what's left of it. And that was amazing to see, just to picture this massive arch right here, and what would have been to the left of us is a huge staircase. Now, this was incredible. I want to show you this. Look at this thing right here, okay? This big stone. This is called the Trumpeting Stone. All right, now the Trumpeting Stone was, this was an unbelievable find that these first excavators found. The Trumpeting Stone was a place on one of the pinnacles of the temple. Okay, look at the other side of this Trumpeting Stone. On this other side, you've got a Hebrew inscription. All right, so that is a 2,000-year-old inscription that they uncovered. Now, notice that the other side of this, there's this notch. Okay, look how nicely carved that is. All right, and you see how it's got this bull nose on the top. So this is a carved piece. All right, there's another carved piece over there, but I want to show you what this would have been. This is the Trumpeting Stone. All right, on the southwest corner, one of the priests would stand in this little notch, and you see the inscription there, and he would blow a shofar horn, a ram's horn, to call people to come and worship. All right, and so this little inscription here, it's mostly intact. There's a couple words missing, but it says, to the trumpeting place to declare the Sabbath. So that's where the priest would stand to blow the shofar horn and call people to worship. Now, another part of, I'll show you where it would have been on the corner. So it would have been right here, right there, right below it. So, and I'm standing right here. Now, the archaeologists actually found it right there, but they moved it over about 20 feet as they kept excavating. Okay, so back to this picture here. They found it right here, which would be right directly below where it came off, and they just moved it 20 feet over as they kept going. So this is where the Trumpeting Stone would have been, where they declared. Now, here's another piece of history. This is just part of traditional church history. It's believed that that James, the author of the book James, the half brother of Jesus, and the first. All right, I think I'm back on. If you guys missed something, if you missed something, let me know, because I was right in the middle of the story about James. So hopefully you're back on and everything's fine. But just let me know that we're good on the live chat there. So James would have fell to his death right here after not recanting his faith. And the very fact that they found this trumpeting stone is just incredible. Absolutely incredible. All right, thank you, Carla. You're back. So seeing that up close and in person was just amazing. Now, I want to show you something else back in this picture here. You notice here, you see some little shops. All right, see these kind of patio coverings here? So you see shops along here, shops along there. All right, I want to show you this picture here. Look at this. Here's where Robinson's Arch would have been, and it spans across right here, and it connects right here, and right below would be some shops. So look again here. All right, we span it right here, and right in here you see shops. Shops all along this wall, shops along this wall right here, and underneath the arch. All right, so when you see this again, here's where the arch would have been, spanning across. These are first century shops. Shops that, no doubt, Jesus would have walked along there, and he would have seen these shops. Maybe he would have gone in and bought something. I don't know. But there were shops here, there were shops here, and these are the remains of these first century shops. That who knows what they sold in these particular places, but they're shops that Jesus would have seen. All this pavement is first century pavement, these paving stones. You see there's a little curb here, there's a little curb right there, and then here would have been more shops against this wall. Now, the reason why these ones are still standing and these ones are not is because, as I told you, the Romans came in and they toppled over. So let me look at this picture again. The Romans came in on the surface up here and pushed over all the walls that were above the surface. They couldn't push these over because they're against earth, but they pushed all these ones. Now, the original Herodian walls went way higher than this. Okay, they went up about 130 feet. All right, so this is only about 62 feet. These would have gone up another probably 60 feet higher than this even. They were massive. So the Romans pushed down from the inside, pushed down all these, and they came crashing down all the way down to street level right here, and they would have landed on all of these shops. That's why these shops are destroyed. That's why these ones are not. So to find these in their state was amazing for the archaeologists. Now, this picture here, you can see some of the foundation and the walls, the separating walls, that were from those shops. So this is directly underneath Robinson's Arch. So you can see the remains of these little shops, which again is just the craziest thing. So then looking again at this, you see how this pavement was crushed underneath all these boulders. Now, look at this pile of boulders. Those boulders, those are all Ashlar Stones. This would have been part of the original wall that went up higher than those current 7 courses of Herodian stones. They moved some of them out of the way to excavate so they could see what this pavement looked like, but they left a lot of it there because they wanted to see, they wanted this to be frozen in time. So these boulders were removed so they could, excavate, but these boulders were left so we could see what the Romans left behind. So when you see this, it's like it was just frozen in time from 70 AD, that this is what Rome left of Jerusalem, and it's heartbreaking to see what they did to the place and the weight of these boulders crushing this pavement. So if you go back out to here, this pavement not near as crushed. This is just obliterated. I'm sure some of this probably was put back together for safety, but these were, obviously you couldn't do anything to those there. There's another view of Robinson's Arch looking to the southwest. And then here's a close-up of some of the busted-up pavement. And then here's some more. And so here's an example of some of the pavement that's been crushed, but then how they reconstructed some of these just for safety purposes and to show you what it would have looked like if it was new 2,000 years ago. Now, on this one here, we've got, I want to show you this. This was exciting. This was a really crazy thing. We were sitting there. First of all, when we came in the Davidson Center, we didn't know they were even open because there was no one there. We had the whole place to ourselves. It was absolutely crazy. And you can walk all along all this stuff. And we kind of felt like we weren't supposed to be there, but we paid to get in, so we're like, okay. So we're walking, and there was like one other person. So we're sitting here, and all of a sudden, I think one of my boys says, hey, look, someone's coming out from underground. And we saw someone popping out here. And we went over, and we found that you can actually go underground here. And we didn't really see that there was this little thing that said danger, no passage. I don't know if that was really supposed to be there or not, but nonetheless, we went underground. into what is their drainage system for ancient Jerusalem. So here we are underground. Now, you'll notice something, how these ashlar stones, they do have the bevels, but they're not as smooth. They knew they didn't have to carve these out as perfectly because they weren't going to be seen. These are the underground foundation stones for the Temple Mount. So they still had their grooves for fitting, but they didn't smooth them out. So these are a lot rougher looking. So now if you kept going north down this hallway here, you'd eventually get to the master course. There is a Herodian Street. What I mean by that is that this is a Herodian Street, a road that Herod built. And see how this is all underground? They've actually uncovered a lot of this Herodian Street that goes all along the whole side of the temple. So this whole road, see it right there? They've uncovered a lot of this, but it's all underground now. So when you saw the master course, that was all up here, but underground. So this road went the whole length of the full western wall. And so here we are back underground. See, this is a water cistern. So drainage would course through here. We saw a lot of these just very small little passageways that, I mean, if you're claustrophobic, this is not the place to go, that's for sure. Here's a little video of it. I'm going to skip through a little bit of this because it's a longer one, and this is Liam's video, so it's a little shaky.
Looks like goo. Oh, that's a dopey web.
A dopey web. I don't even know what that is. And there's my wife. That spider almost ate her.
Because it's a sewer.
So, I mean, we really didn't know if we were even supposed to be down here.
Yeah.
But there was a few signs, so we're like, well, it looks like tourists are allowed to be down here, but we didn't see a single person. They found old bronze coins, they found vases, they found bronze bowls, they found all kinds of first century artifacts down in here, which is just amazing. A lot of stuff that was from the pillaging of the temple was in this.
It's all wet.
The boys didn't quite know the difference between a sewer and drainage, so this wasn't quite a sewer. Though there would have been some type of, probably animal sewage and stuff that got dumped down here.
Wait.
Now, during
Hold on, that was mean. That's...
During the sack of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., which we're going to talk about later in one of the other live streams, in 70 A.D., when Rome came in to destroy Jerusalem, thousands of Jews hid under here to hide from the Romans, because the Romans were coming in and taking them as slaves. They were killing them. So thousands of Jews, some of the last Jews to survive the sack of Jerusalem, would have hid down here. So this corridor just kept going on and on and on. Yeah, the boys said it was like Goonies.
It looks like there's still...
Imagine people lived down here to try to escape. Oh, see, I'm talking about it right there. So, and then the ones that stayed here were eventually caught and killed, and the ones that fled went to Masada. Yeah. So we'd already gone to Masada, so that made sense to everyone there. They stayed in Masada for a couple of years. I don't want to spoil it, so we'll skip past my teaching moment there. And here we are, coming back up onto first century pavement. There's the shops. That turnstile is not original.
Sketchy.
Apparently sketchy as well. Here's one more. This is my video, so it's a little bit not as shaky. Simultaneous as Liam's video, just from a different angle.
It's like never ending.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
If we had the time, I would have loved to
Okay.
keep going and see how far that goes.
No, that's good.
Everyone's like, let's turn back. And because there was no one around, you kind of felt like, is this safe to be here? We didn't really know. And but I'm glad we went down. I love this photo of us just all crouched in this tiny little hallway. So this Davidson Center was just, it was amazing. I mean, it was such an awesome highlight because you walked among first century ruins and in places where Jesus clearly would have walked himself. Now, right to the left here, there was a bunch of these excavated mikvahs. Mikvahs were the purification pools. So, we saw the purification bowls that were at Cana. That was mostly probably for foot washing, hand washing, and also utensil washing. But when you went to temple, you had to actually wash your whole body to purify yourself before going up. Now, there was about 30 or 40, I think, mikvahs that were found some around the Temple Mount area, and this is one of them. So Jesus would have gone into the mikvahs whenever he went to temple, and so it's possible that he might have even walked down here. Here's so you have down and you've got up. Here's the boys washing themselves, clearly getting all their sin out, and then just a little family photo. But you can see that there's the little walk down baths. You get yourself outwardly purified, symbolically purified before you'd go into the temple. Now, looking back at this, so here again, Robinson's Arch. Here's where we went underground, right there, and then those mikvahs would have been here. There'd be more mikvahs over here and a lot more over here. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be walking around this corner, and we're going to go to the southern steps. This again was one of our highlights. This was amazing. So here's what it looks like today. Walk around the corner, go to the southern steps. See, there's hundreds of people. This is probably a Sunday or it's just a large tour group. And again, when we were here, there was nobody. I mean, we had the place to ourselves. It felt weird. So here's us walking around the corner. So this is along the southern face right here. This is the Al-Aksa Mosque now, because as I mentioned, it's operated now. The Temple Mount's operated by the Muslims. Here's the view you'd get from the south. So beyond this hill here would be Bethlehem. This is the Mount of Offense right here. So you've got the valley that goes out to there. So just a really beautiful view. And here is the southern steps. Now, I just want you to get a picture here because these steps are original. From 2,000 years ago. Everyone would have walked along these steps, from Peter to Paul to Caiaphas and Annas and Jesus and Mary and Joseph. Anyone who was born in that first century who was a Jew would have walked on these steps. Some of these steps are carved right out of the bedrock, and some of them are pieces of stone that were carved and laid down when it wasn't quite level. So depending on where they built. So a lot of this stuff is original bedrock that was carved, and a lot of it was original that was placed. But these are the original steps here. So again, here's where we're sitting. So we're sitting right about there, in that spot right there. And I know that because of these two doors here, and also this right here. All right, I'm going to back out here. I want you to notice something. This here is the edge of what's called the double gate. Now, later on, the Crusaders built this little just expansion that just went straight into the double gate. But let's look back again, okay? There's part of the double gate. So the double gate, there's two gates. Over here, there'd be the triple gate, which I don't have a picture handy, I don't think. But double gate, triple gate. So that building you just saw goes right up to there and then comes out. Why they did that, I don't know. I know it was already walled in by the time the Crusaders got there. But if you can see here, see the archway, that is original Herodian archway. This is the exact gate that everyone would have gone into in order to go to the temple, either the double gate or the triple gate. There's a Roman inscription above it that is still visible from 2,000 years ago. And this lintel here is Herodian. Now, again, as I mentioned, because things were built and rebuilt and captured and taken over, whatever, they filled this in eventually. So now, clearly, it's not an entry way. But this is a Herodian entrance. and it is called the double gate, or they're called the Hulda gates, and then the triple gate is down this way. I don't think I have a picture of that. So to sit here, there's my parents, to sit here where all these different people would have been was amazing. This flight of stairs here is about 210 feet wide, and they alternated the span of each step, alternated from 35 inches to 12 inches. So you have a 35 inch, then you have a 12 inch, 35, 12. The reason they did that is because they wanted Jews to slowly and deliberately come to temple. They didn't want to just rush up the stairs, run up the stairs. They wanted them to look down in humility at their feet and pay attention to where they're walking. So they did that on purpose in order to make it a slow, deliberate, careful approach to the temple. In some extra biblical text, I think it was in the one of the writings of the Sanhedrin, they talk about how Gamaliel sat on these steps. Gamaliel was the Apostle Paul's Jewish teacher when Paul was still a Pharisee. And Gamaliel sat here, and Gamaliel is also the one who called for the release of the apostles in Acts chapter 5. So you see all these different people from history that sat among these. I mean, this is where you'd hang out maybe afterwards with that great view looking to the south. I imagine possibly that, Mary and Joseph might have sat at those southern steps and looked towards Bethlehem. If they didn't maybe make because, you'd come down from Nazareth every year for Passover. Maybe they didn't go as far as Bethlehem, but maybe they just sit there on the steps and look and just, look towards their home, their original home, their family home. You just never know. But I mean, millions of first century Jews would have walked on these steps over the years, and they're still there, which is amazing. Here's a little bit of video of it. This, again, is Liam's handiwork, so it's a little shaky and a little twirly. But here, I'll try to maybe pause it a little bit. So here you can see the triple gate. So I do have a little bit. So you have 1, 2, 3, the triple gates right there. They're also walled up. Down here, you would have had different courts. You would have different mikvahs also here, different things. You can kind of tell some of the alternating distances of the span. There's the Herodian lintel of the double gate. So some of these spots, like right here, have always been reconstructed for safety. So not everything is totally original. Some of them have been refurbished.
I don't know if I should be walking in here.
That was probably a mikveh that Liam was standing on top of. You can see down into, there's a lot of residential areas we could walk into. I didn't put any of that video in there because it was Liam and it was very shaky. So these were obviously redone right there. But a lot of residential areas, a lot of shops you can walk into. Actually, not all of this was redone. Some of this is original. And then here again, there's the Mount of Olives, Mount of Offense over here. I apologize for my son's shaky camera work. And then again, looking south towards Bethlehem. So really just an incredible, incredible, peaceful place, other than the buses going by. But just a really, really cool experience for us to be on these southern steps. One of those sort of like special, didn't really expect it to captivate you the way that it did. So then lastly, our last little spot on our little tour for tonight, and it looks like we'll end pretty much on time. We're going to go on to the actual Temple Mount. So again, if we were sitting right here, as we would have gone into the double gate there. Again, here's what it looks like. So we were sitting right here. There's where the double gate was. And you would come in up a staircase. Right now, if the staircase was still there, you'd pop into the mosque. But there used to be a little entrance. Now, I mentioned this on Sunday, and I'll show you. If you look here, you see this is a big rectangular area. But the original that Hezekiah built was a square. It was 500 cubits square. And it was built on top of this little spot here. This is Mount Moriah. And so eventually, though, Herod wanted to show off, and he wanted to build a more magnificent Temple Mount. So he expanded out here further and reconstructed the temple to be more glorious. So you see this little square spot. Well, eventually, here's the original square spot. And then Herod built all of this. So that's why it's a big retaining wall, because you see how this slopes. He had to backfill all of that. All right, so this square is the original that Hezekiah had built, or the original location, and then it was expanded. So again, here's the picture I used on Sunday. This green and blue area is the location of Hezekiah's original, but then Herod expanded all of this to make it just absolutely glorious. Here's another, this is a model. This is an actual real-life model. You can see the fence where people would stand, so you can see kind of how big it was. So these are the exits that you would come out of. So here's the southern steps. We would have walked through the double gates, up a staircase, and we would pop out right here if they were still there. Triple gates, you'd go in a staircase. And the staircase, a lot of the area has been excavated, and they said it's beautiful. I couldn't find any photos of it, but it was quite a grand staircase to go into here from the southern steps, up the staircase, and then into the temple area with this sight to behold. And this is where Jesus, it's kind of like stadiums, right, where you pop out of the stairs and you see the baseball field for the first time. It's just an awesome sight. Jews that would be visiting would pop out of here and just behold this sight, and it was just breathtaking for them. Now, here's what it looks like today. This is where we came in. This is a view from right about here. We came in right there, so you can see these trees there, right? So we're right there. And so this is all level from the first century. Some of the pavement's original, some of it's obviously been renovated. The buildings, none of these buildings are 2,000 years old. As we know from the story on Sunday, Jesus had all these buildings torn down, and obviously these are all mosques that were added a few hundred years later in the 600s. So a lot of these paving stones would be original. I don't know exactly which ones, but a lot of these ones that are from the outer areas would have been untouched. So again, this is now we're at the very edge, so this wouldn't have been most likely not part of the actual temple. So this would have been more of the common area that people would have walked along and maybe sold things along, things like that. Yeah, so this is the western wall. We exited right here. So right outside here is where those guys were dancing and singing. So a lot of these arches were just built later by the Muslims as they came in. Beautiful architecture and quite old as well, but not original. But it's a massive space, 20 football fields. And then now we have this, which is called the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is where most people believe that the temple was originally. However, again, we don't know exactly where the temple was. It's just kind of a guess. But the Dome of the Rock is built on the very top of Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is not only where the temple was originally, but it's also where Abraham almost sacrificed Isaac, which is why this is considered a holy site for both the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims, because this is where Abraham almost sacrificed Isaac, at the top of this. And this is the site that David purchased for his son Solomon to build the original temple. So this is the most sought-after land in the world. It's considered the third holiest site in Islam. It's the first holiest site in Judaism. It's also where the Muslims say, and the Quran says, that Muhammad took his night journey from Mecca and landed miraculously right here on Mount Moriah. And then from this place, it said that Muhammad went up to heaven, had a discussion with Jesus and with Moses, and bartered with Moses to cut down the daily prayers from 50 to 5, which is why they pray 5 times a day, because of, all that stuff. So this is a holy site for the Muslims, for the Jews, and it's also revered for us as Christians too, because of the various connections. Now I'll show you what's inside. Now this was built. The original was built in around the 600s, but I think it was an earthquake. I think it was an earthquake that destroyed it, or maybe it just collapsed over time. So this one's from about I think 1000 or about 1200 AD, something like that. It's been renovated a lot. The gold was only added, I think, in this like the 50s or 60s, and so the gold is relatively new. But on the inside, only Muslims are on the inside. This is not my photograph, but the inside is basically just a rotunda, and you can walk around in a circle, and in the middle is the exposed earth. So that is bedrock, which is purported, and it is true that somewhere on this land is where Abraham almost sacrificed Isaac. Whether or not that's the exact spot, we don't know, but it was somewhere here on Mount Moriah. This is where they purport it to be. And so you can just basically, you look and you pray. You look at and you pray at the original Mount Moriah, which is largely covered now by the Temple Mount. This is one of the rare places where it's exposed. And so we got a little photograph as a family. Despite it being a Muslim monument, still it is a beautiful building, beautiful architecture. Actually, a lot of Christian architecture in this part of the world, and actually going into Europe, modeled a lot of this afterwards. As a matter of fact, actually one time later on during the Crusades, so this was built previous to the Crusades. This was used as a church for a short time by the Knights Templar. That was a Catholic group that came in with the Crusades that took over Jerusalem from the Muslims, turned this into a church, turned the other mosque that's on the Temple Mount into a church. So most of these buildings have just turned over hands multiple times. Jews, Christians, and Muslims all owned the same real estate and just kind of played musical chairs throughout history. So it's interesting, it's frustrating, it's confusing, but it's history. Lastly, we ended our journey. This was our last day in Israel, and it was so fitting because the last real view we had of Israel was from the Temple Mount, looking to the east towards the Mount of Olives. I get choked up just thinking about it. This is us. So if we're basically standing right here. So these people here that are taking their picture, they're looking towards this view. All right. And when you look straight east, you see the Mount of Olives. And it's awesome. It is awesome. This is so awesome for so many reasons. I mean, you know the obvious reasons of just all the things that took place on the Mount of Olives. But when you even know the connection to the Mount of Olives and the temple, it is from this place where the Old Testament prophet Zechariah says that the Messiah is going to return to the earth. I mean, you understand that this is where Jesus was arrested. It's where he was betrayed. It's where he prayed a lot. It's where he sat upon here and looked upon Jerusalem and wept because Jerusalem would not believe in him, the Messiah. It's where he came in for his triumphal entry from Bethany on the donkey, coming in to Jerusalem. And it's also where he ascended to heaven from. So he was betrayed there, but he also ascended from somewhere right here. He was ascended to heaven. Everyone was looking, and then you remember that when it said, "Why are you guys staring in the sky? Don't you understand? In the same manner he left, he's also going to return." Well, in Zechariah it says the Messiah is going to come to the earth upon the Mount of Olives. He's going to split the Mount of Olives in half, shoving some to the north, some to the south, creating a valley that goes straight into Jerusalem, and he's going to go through the Golden Gate, which is what I told you was the one gate that is still closed. That's a very exciting gate for a lot of reasons. The Muslims have walled it up because they know that the Jewish Old Testament says the Messiah is going to come through the gate, so the Muslims closed it up to prevent the Messiah from coming in. And, of course, the Jews are waiting for the first arrival of the Messiah. They missed the actual first arrival. But Zechariah says that, and even in the New Testament where it says that, don't you know that just as Jesus ascended in that manner, he's going to return in that manner upon the Mount of Olives. And so when we stood upon the Mount of Olives, we're sitting there going, this is where he's going to return to the earth. This is also why there's a big, massive Jewish cemetery there, because those Jews believe that they would be part of the first in line for the resurrection of the dead, because they believe the Messiah is going to come down upon the Mount of Olives, take all these folks, you can't see the cemetery because these trees, out of their graves, and that they would get to march with their Messiah into his holy city. So our last view on our trip was from this place that is currently being occupied by the Muslims. But we know that as we look upon the Mount of Olives, we know that the Lord's going to come back and he's going to establish his kingdom forever and ever. And so our last picture for tonight is my family giving God thanks that we got this awesome trip and we got to stand and cast our eyes upon the Mount of Olives one more time before leaving Jerusalem and leaving Israel. So it was incredible. The next time, my family's going out of town next week for my grandma's memorial in Sioux City, so we'll be gone for a little bit. So the next time we do this, we're going to be looking at the Mount of Olives, but we're going to have to wait probably about 3 weeks to do this, unfortunately. As we go through the photos of the Mount of Olives, I think you're just going to be, just astounded. And just to see all this stuff come to life and be interconnected it's amazing. So that is all for tonight. We ended pretty much on time. So good on Pastor Joby for doing that. And I just recommend you guys too, just reading through your notes, just some of the scriptures that talk about some of the things that happened on the on the Temple Mount. This is where Jesus observed the widow giving her widow's mite. It's where Jesus or Mary and Joseph would have brought him to dedicate him as a baby. That actually the widow's mite would have taken place right about where we're standing, because this would have been the court of the women. If I go back to this diagram here, we're standing about right here. And this would have been the court of the women, which is where the widow's mite would have taken place. This is where Mary and Joseph would have dedicated Jesus as a baby. Lots of things would have happened here. A lot of different teachings here. There's so many. There's a lot of the scriptures that are in your PDF notes. You can read about some of the things that took place in this spot, and you can look back at some of these pictures. But Jesus taught every day in the temple when he was in Jerusalem. So he was always somewhere on these grounds. He was teaching in various ways to various people, various different teachings. And part of me wonders if he looked out at that Mount of Olives and just looked forward to the day that he ascends from there and also returns to there. It was pretty amazing. So anyway, that is it for tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed this despite the little glitches here and there. If you missed anything, if you're confused by something, just shoot me an email. If you needed some clarity on something, want some more information on something, I'd love to give you guys any information that you're interested in. God bless you guys, and thank you for watching, and look forward to the next time. So let me pray and thank the Lord for tonight. Lord, we thank you again that you sent your son, and he was a man of his word. He cast down every stone of all the buildings on the Temple Mount. But we're also thankful that you spared a lot. We know that we don't need pictures of buildings and things for faith. We have your word. That's all we need to believe in your son, to believe who he is, who he says he is, what he spoke. But it's also really nice and really cool and really amazing to see a lot of the things that you allowed to be left behind for us to behold. Even as he said, if we wouldn't praise, then the rocks would cry out. And if these walls, these stones, these first century roads could speak and tell stories, I'd love to hear the stories they could tell us of the things they saw. So in a very real way, these were like witnesses to Jesus. So we're grateful that we can still cast our eyes upon some of these things, whether natural, like the Mount of Olives, or man-made, like Herod's Temple or the Temple Mount. We're grateful for it. So thank you, Lord, for giving us this evening together. We love you. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, folks. Well, have a great rest of your evening. God bless you, and we'll see you on Sunday when we get into John chapter 3, looking at Jesus' encounter with Nicodemus, which is going to be right here at the Temple Mount again, and just a really, really awesome beginning of this story in chapter 3. So I'm really, really excited for that. So God bless you guys. Have a great rest of your evening.